Hey y'all, and welcome to day 4 of our 12 Days of Christmas tutorials and giveaways. Don't forget to join Brittany Barnes Boutique Tumblr art group. I have that link down below for y'all so you can enter to win one of the amazing giveaways we have provided by these companies, as well as some custom tumblers and Starbucks gift cards from myself. Sorry for the black overspray all over my hands. When I get in a crafting mood, I just completely forget that I'm actually recording these for public to see. But yeah, it's crafting hands, so it's fine, right? All right, so we are going to be making another ornament. And to do so, if you didn't see our last tutorial, we are using the new attachment from Cami Page Boutique. There are 2 different tapered sizes. Chances are they are not going to be too big for any ornament out there, but if you do get one of those extra large, like snow globe type ornaments, you can spin that on here. Just if the top of the ornament is a little bit too big, all you have to do is take some electrical tape and spin that around the base of your tapered attachment, and then you can pop your ornament right on there. So we're going to place our ornament on the smaller part of the attachment and then tape that off at the top so that you can have a crisp, clean line between your paint and the plastic remaining on the top of the ornament. You want to sand that down to give your paint and your epoxy something to grab onto. I used either a 220 or 320 grit sandpaper and then went in with my COLORFLEX blush COLORFIX paint. I have said this many times before, but this paint has excellent coverage, and I really love building that coverage up with very thin coats because I feel like it gives you a very smooth and perfect finish. I did use the low heat setting on my heat gun to dry up this paint really quickly in between coats. You just want to make sure that you do not get too close with that heat or overheat your ornament because it is plastic, and speaking from experience, it will melt. After we have our paint dry, we're going to take the tiniest bit of epoxy and spread that all over the ornament super thin. And then we're going to go in with ESME, which is a beautiful pink glitter from PDB Creative Studio. Just dump that all over, and then make sure you do take a gloved hand and pat some of that glitter down so that you can get it a little flat before you start adding on your epoxy layers to minimize the amount of epoxy and sanding that you have to do in between coats. You're going to want to epoxy that until smooth. I did 2 coats and sanding in between, and I actually did sand after that second coat as well. But whenever you sand before you do a peekaboo, you want to make sure that you use a very high grit sandpaper. If you go in with a low grit sandpaper, it's going to have those thicker pieces of grit, and chances are you will be able to see that through your spray paint. So make sure that you are using a higher grit. Something like 320 or 400 will help you really buff out any little pokey pieces or bumps that might be standing up, while keeping your project super smooth so that none of those scratches from the sandpaper will show through your spray paint. So we're just going to take these little 1 to 1.5 inch snowflake stencils and place them all over the ornament. After you have all of your stencils down, you want to make sure that they are pressed down really well, especially since we are using a curved surface, and we are also using a stencil vinyl rather than a temporary vinyl that might be a little bit thinner and stick a little bit better. So just make sure you have those pressed down really well so the paint does not seep through or underneath your stencils. I'm going to tape this off once again, and then we're going to go in with my Color Shot Scuba paint. And then once that dries, remove all of your stencils. And since we will be using a clear decal with white backed images on it, which means that the images have white ink behind them, however they do have a clear border, we want to put those on a very glossy surface. So we're going to want to put a very thin coat of epoxy on top of our Peekaboo before we start placing our florals. Now, I made a distressed tumbler using these same florals, and there are quite a bit of very small elements on that sheet. And when I laid these florals out on the sheet for Gracefully Created, I kept in mind that sometimes there are random spaces that need to be filled whenever we are working on projects, as well as making matching keychains or smaller things like this. So don't toss those small things. You can use them on smaller projects like this. So I just took all of those extras that I had left over from doing my distressed cup, and I just trimmed around some of the elements on one of the larger images. We're going to place those around the top portion of the ornament, and then we're going to go around the bottom half, or the bottom 3/4, I guess you would say, with the little floral clusters with the antler. Now, when working with a tumbler, you don't have to get really close to the image itself whenever cutting it out. You do want to get remotely close to avoid having so much of that clear that you have to press down to make sure that it can't be seen under epoxy. But in this case, since we are putting it on a curved surface, you really want to trim as close to that detail as you possibly can to minimize the amount of vinyl that you have to stretch around those curves. So we're going to cut down in between all of those little elements. Even the tiniest little ones matter, because once you start trying to press it down onto the curve, of course the image is flat and you're going to have to alter it just slightly. So if you cut in between all of those little elements and as close to the image as possible, then once you start sort of contouring that around the curve, you'll be able to press those little bits down, and with a very, very small amount of heat. It does not take much at all to heat these up, and you do not need much. But with a very small amount of heat, you can work all of those little kinks or bubbles out. Those little places that you trimmed in between the elements will overlap each other, and you will be able to work out any of those creases in the vinyl and work it around the curve of your project. Now, if you have a crease that just won't go away, all you have to do is take a craft blade, slice right down the center, and then pick it up just a little bit, apply some heat, and flatten that out, and you won't be able to see that cut. Another way to work out any of those crimps that you might have in your vinyl is to take your craft blade and run your craft blade alongside the edge of something in your design. So some element that has a edge on it, like the edge of one of the flower petals or a feather, whatever it may be. Run your craft blade alongside the nearest element close to your little crimp that you have in your vinyl. Once you do that, you can lift up that piece of vinyl, apply a little bit of heat, and work that out. And since you cut alongside an edge, it's just going to overlap your vinyl and appear as if it was just naturally there or supposed to be there. Once you have all of your vinyl on, of course, go all over and make sure that it's pressed down really well. And then you can go in with your final coats of epoxy. I'm using Artistry's 1:1 ratio fast set so I can get these ornaments done really quickly. And then I am adding in Filter from COLORFLEX to add on a little shimmer in my final coats. I always torch my epoxy just to remove any micro bubbles that might be in there. It works a lot better than using a heat gun because a torch touches those bubbles and will pop them on the surface, where a heat gun will only heat your epoxy and cause it to become thinner. So it's easier for those bubbles to rise to the top, but it doesn't pop them right away. So go over these with your torch, but very, very quickly and lightly, or it will melt your ornament. I am seriously in love with the way that these ornaments turned out. The epoxy is crystal clear and it just looks like glass. So the design really pops from these, and they will definitely stand out amongst the other ornaments that you have on your tree. As always, all of the materials that I have used in this tutorial will be listed down below in the description. Don't forget to join our Facebook group so you can enter today's giveaway. We are picking winners daily. I hope that y'all are enjoying the 12 days of Christmas so far. That is all for today. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you next time.